I think Ireland's current problem is really key for anyone to look at because of something that's happening since 2008. Okay, the economic problems we're in are completely because the banks, after being deregulated, going for this whole free market thing, were basically taken over internally by ethicless people, the kind of people who rise in big organizations, who stole massive amounts of money, made huge amounts of misinvestment. They did this throughout in the United States, in Ireland, in the UK. Okay, the huge debt crisis we have, the huge waste crisis we have, is completely and utterly the product of how the banks ran their businesses. Okay, and the governments have been landed with this problem because, as in any order, the state has had to come in to guarantee the survival of its population in the face of miserable banking fraud. Okay, what has really added an element of danger in this, and why Ireland is so illuminating, is that opposition and conservative parties, particularly in the English-speaking world, have exploited the debt crisis, okay, and have also exploited the bank's ability to get soft treatment in most of the mainstream media to spin this as if this is the government spending problem. What they're doing is they're taking the symptom and they're dealing with it as the cause. What we saw in Ireland is the Irish government adopted austerity. They tried to treat the symptom, but the cause is what the banks is what has to be addressed here. And the Irish government's austerity programs, if anything, they hurt the issue because they reduced the amount of stimulus and support that might have been going into the economy, that might have been sustaining it to some extent, even though the banking, particularly in Ireland, was so horrific, it might have been inevitable that Ireland would have to be bailed out. But the key thing that people have to get back to is we have to stand up to the Tea Party and the Tories in the UK, who seem to think that this is because of public sector spending, okay? And it isn't because of public sector spending. We are not in this economic crisis because of government debt. Certainly, government spending and debt played a role, particularly in the United States, particularly under the Bush administration. We're talking about the Iraq War and such. But really, in the end of the day, it was how the banks were conducting their business. Government austerity programs will not solve this problem because the amount of debt, the amount of risk that the banks accumulated is far and away beyond anything that any government could particularly waste or spend. Okay? And now, if we get in a situation where conservative governments, like they have in the UK throughout much of the world, are able to exploit the current debt crisis to promote their own ideology, and then foolishly go forward with plans of major spending cuts at this program before the banking issues are dealt with, we could see what has been a bad recession. But let's be honest about it. How many of you have had your banks foreclosed? How many of you lost your bank? How many people have lost your banking account? Unemployment is higher than a normal recession. But we could see 1930s-like situation. And this is what the austerity programs would lead to. You would have, right now, the consumers are down, the businesses are down because because the banks can't loan, because they messed up their balance sheets. They don't have money to loan. If all of a sudden the government is cutting staff people leave government work, they can't find any other kind of work, they join the long-term unemployment. Businesses have to cut back their public spending department. This will extenuate the recession, which will cause more housing foreclosures, which will mean less people able to refinance their house, less people looking to buy new houses, less housing construction, which will just simply have a feedback loop, which will actually make the bank's debts even worse. These debts that are in derivatives will spread through the world. We are seeing in the Tea Party, the Tory Party, we've already seen it in the Irish Party government in the UK, this austerity craze, is the #1 threat after the banks themselves. And people need to be made aware of this.